Why did you get involved with a Kurdish man? Why didn't you marry a Swedish man of your own nation so you could live a peaceful life? Why did you associate with Kurds and Kurdistan? In response, she would say, I agree, and that is my own decision. If time goes back, I would still choose you. We often discuss that if perhaps I would pass away before her or she would die before me. But I was happy that she passed away before me because I can withstand her absence. Many times, when she would get angry, she would say, I know that you also want to leave me and marry a younger Kurdish woman or get a second wife like your friends. She referred to those Kurdish leaders whose wives she had befriended in the mountains. Their husbands left them and married other women when returning to the cities. This is the narration of the life of a Swedish woman whose husband was one of the most prominent leaders of the Kurdish movement, PUK, who, in spite of the disloyalty of those leaders towards her, not only continued serving the movement, but her service continues even after her passing away. Agneta, the Kurdish movement's Swedish fighter, Peshmarga. Her full name is Agneta Kling. Born on the 16th of February 1943 in the capital city of Stockholm. Both her parents belonged to one of the aristocratic families of Sweden. Her mother's father was a well-off businessman in Gothenburg City. After passing away in the 1960s, part of his wealth, estimated at nearly 20,000 Swedish kroner at the time, along with a bunch of business stocks, was passed on to Agneta. Her father was an executive director of a company, which is the reason why they had maids at home when she was a child and she did not work until she was older. At the age of 4, she was enrolled in kindergarten. After finishing high school, she studied in the secretarial department for a year to work as a secretary and received a diploma in finance and business. She could speak the languages of Swedish, English, German, and Italian very well. When she was 20 years old, her parents parted ways and divorced. Then her mother got diagnosed with cancer, which forced Agneta to start working. Her first job was in the registration department of Stockholm University. In 1966, she worked in the student admission department. Omar, a young man from Amuda city located in eastern Kurdistan or northeastern Syria, traveled from London to Stockholm University to apply as a student. There, Agneta does not take his paperwork, but afterwards, through a friend, he gets invited to a party. They met each other there, and from that moment on, their acquaintance started. The beauty, outstanding personality, unique behavior, Agneta's different demeanor, and different sense of fashion captivated the young man from Amuda. This marks the start of their love life and marriage, which lasted for more than 50 years. In 1974, they decided to get married. For their engagement, they went to court, and during the night, the Kurdish people in Sweden, along with their friends, organized a special celebration for them. But from the beginning of their life, Sheikh Mus informed Agneta, "Don't think that we may live with one another forever. I'm a leftist. I don't know if tomorrow I'm toiling China or in Cuba revolting, or maybe I'll leave to return to Kurdistan." In response, Agneta answered, "I accept all of your conditions, even if that means that one day we'll have to go to the mountains of Kurdistan to become freedom fighters and live in caves." Before Agneta got to know her husband, she had never heard a Kurdish word, nor did she know anything about them. That's why she mentions that she thought every Kurd was a horse rider with a dagger attached to their belts. But Omar didn't possess a horse nor a dagger. Her husband tells her, "Agneta, you could still keep your surname." She rejects it, saying, "I would like to adopt your surname, Sheikh Mus." She also mentions that, "Even though I didn't know the language, I would still attend the Kurdish meetings and gatherings. I would participate in protests and cultural celebrations such as Nowruz. I learned the Kurdish traditional dances, and along with a few of my Swedish friends, we would participate and perform." A year after their marriage, her husband became a founding member of the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, PUK, which is why he returned to Kurdistan in 1978, planning to stay only for 3 weeks, but he took about 6 months. Agneta says, during that time, I became quite anxious, and politicians, along with news reporters and newscasters, would contact me to ask about the political state in western and southern parts of Kurdistan. When Omar returned to Sweden, he said, I won't be returning to Kurdistan, but over the course of the following days, he changed his mind and said, I'm going to return to Kurdistan. I told him, if he went back this time, I'd tag along. Initially, he said you shouldn't do that, but afterwards, when he knew that I insisted on that decision, he agreed to it. At the start of 1980, I decided to go with him and leave everything in Sweden behind. Before his trip for a long while, I had participated with Omar in his political activities. This time, I wanted to take real action. The Kurdish nation has been mistreated and oppressed in a very brutal way for centuries and has been left hopeless many times. Therefore, in my opinion, struggling for the Kurds and their rights is an important cause. For this trip, they dedicated an hour to learn the Kurdish language. Omar Sheikh Mus taught his wife Kurdish for 3 straight weeks. Afterwards, he said, that is enough. Agneta said, he was afraid of me learning more for my own safety. He didn't want me to understand more. He didn't want me to completely understand those imminent dangers that we would face. Because it was a short time to learn a new language, I couldn't speak or understand Kurdish very well. Meeting with the Sheikh Mus family. In 1980, when they embarked on their journey from Sweden, they first landed in Damascus, the capital of Syria, during which they were given permission to visit his family. That's why they didn't lose the opportunity, Agneta mentions. When we reached Amuda, a big wave of positivity was covering Omar's face. I took a look at my surroundings and couldn't find anything unique in this town that could capture my attention, but with Omar's positivity and radiance, I became happy. During that visit, Omar's family shows a lot of respect towards Agneta, which makes her more delighted. Afterwards, when reaching Iran, they began their trip to Kurdistan. When they arrived in Mahabad, they changed into the traditional Kurdish attire. They then traveled by car until reaching Sardasht and Beuran. Afterwards, they set their journey by foot. Initially, Agneta insisted that she also take their journey by foot, but they made her ride a mule upon reaching Khrinau-Zang. Around the same time, Hero Ibrahim, wife of Jalal Talabani, reached the mountains. The moment Jalal Talabani hears that Agneta is also coming, they start to build them a house in the mountains located right behind their own house. Life in Khrinau-Zang. From here on begins the fable of a different life. From the very first day after reaching Nauzang until 2 months later, her knees were in pain. When washing dishes or plates, she would have to sit cross-legged, which was new and difficult for her. At the time, only 5 women were in the mountains: Hero Ibrahim Ahmed, Narmin Othman, Runak Sheikh Janab, Nazanin Othman, and Pakiza Khan. Initially, she started a friendship with Hero Ibrahim and continued to do so with the other women each day at a time. Amuda's bride then makes a decision to become a Peshmerga fighter. Therefore, Naushirwan Mustafa, who would communicate with her in German, taught her how to use a firearm, marking her as the first foreign female fighter alongside the Kurdish revolutionary fighters, having the nickname Sister Tara chosen for her. Agneta would describe mountain life as follows. We would live under a tent or in a mud house. Our space was very small. Many of the headquarters and outposts had built small bathrooms out of rocks and mud. We had to heat up the water ourselves while our surroundings were filled with lice, scorpions, mice, and snakes. We would sleep at night with our handguns ready beneath our pillows. Food was scarce. We would eat only 1 meal a day. Often, it was bread and lentil soup, or rice, no meat, maybe once a month if we could get our hands on it. But water was available and plentiful, fresh and cold, coming down from the streams and springs. Even though I didn't consider that life easy and well-going, I believe life was simple and straightforward there. In the mountains, my relationship with Qadir Khabat was outstanding. We could easily communicate for more than half an hour and truly understand one another, me using Swedish and him using Kurdish. I particularly enjoyed our conversations. Also, my relationship with Noshirwan Mustafa was very good. From time to time, when he would visit the other camps, he would pluck beautiful natural wild flowers and bring them to me. I found it quite joyous. I viewed it as a civilized and considerate action. Dr. Kamal Khoshnau was also like a brother to me. I even called him old brother. I would call Dr. Khidr Masoom young brother. I would also call him Speedy Gonzales, which is a character in a cartoon film, the quickest mouse in all of Mexico, which is why I named him that, due to him doing everything quickly and very fast. He would also eat very fast. My relationships with Runak Khan, Mala Bakhtiar, Narmin Khan, and Sheikh Daro were also very good. Also, Hero Ibrahim and I were two close friends. All was well with Jalal Talabani. He was generally a funny person and would often crack jokes. He wasn't so serious during those days. Little by little, our relations got deeper. Agneta agreed in the mountains with the other ladies that she would teach them English in return for them teaching her Kurdish. But laughing about her memories, she mentions, "They actually tricked me and didn't teach me Kurdish. I only learned a few words." During her stay in the mountains, she saw aircraft bombardment for the first time but was not frightened. As she would say herself, "I wasn't afraid of warplanes because I hadn't seen them before. I did not know how they would drop the bombs and engage. For the first time when we were bombed by the warplanes, I wanted to look at them and see the way they fought, but that was far-fetched and unrealistic, as I was standing close to the opening of one of the aircraft bombardment shelters above. Suddenly, two people grabbed my hands and pulled me inside. But I feared mice, and whenever one would pop out, I would yell for them to be taken away. The Peshmerga fighters would laugh at me. Quite frankly, I was more afraid of the poisonous snakes." After some time, Agneta returned to Sweden for a visit, and per her saying, "I was a skinny lady. I had lost nearly 5 kilos in Nauzeng. When I looked at myself in the mirror, it appeared as if I had just come back from one of those concentration camps of Jews during Hitler's time." During this period, Omar Sheikh Mus, her husband, recounted his memories. "In the year 1980, we were bombarded. We suffered injuries and casualties. I told Agneta to go with the other women to the village of Kani Zerd. She rejected. I told her that she must go. I could not keep looking out for her and the Peshmergas simultaneously. I shouted at her. She then said, "I'll go, but you have to know that this is the last time you raise your voice at me." It occurred that she returned to Sweden, and even there, she would boast to her friends that she had been very strong and was not afraid. She would tell them how fun it was being a Peshmerga fighter and how she had taken up arms. Her friends found her story very uncanny and kept asking her how she had survived in that environment. I would jokingly tell her, "What's the matter? Have you also learned to brag in front of your friends?" Agneta returned to Nauzeng after a year and continued with her work. She felt as if she had built a spiritual relationship with the Kurds and Kurdistan, but still, many actions in the Kurdish society and culture hurt her. She used to say, "Many behaviors were unusual to me. For instance, there were some conservative religious men who were not ready to shake hands with a woman. Having come from a community who believed in equal rights, I couldn't fathom this behavior. Even though Omar did explain the reasoning behind this, I rejected the idea and considered it as discriminatory and looking down on women. I do have a bitter memory. Sometimes the tribal leaders and aghas of the surrounding areas would visit Omar. One time, I wanted to speak to them directly. When presenting my hand, they didn't do the same because I was a female. This action weighed heavy on my heart. Omar tried convincing me that this is how the values and cultures of these villages are in this area, but I couldn't accept it. When Omar was conversing with the two leaders, one of them agreed to shake hands with me, but the other one still rejected. Also, there is a delightful incident When Jalal Talabani, Omar, Hero Ibrahim and I would go to a place or for a visit, both Omar and Jalal Talabani would make us walk ahead of them. I would notice that some of the Peshmergas that would come along secretly and quietly laughed at this behavior as to how could we ever walk before them. The return to Sweden. In 1981, Agneta and her spouse once again departed to Tehran through East Kurdistan to fly abroad on a plane. Her spouse, who had previously visited Sheikh Azzeddin Hosseini, brought 2 letters from him. One was for the Secretary General of the United Nations, and the other was a letter to the international public opinion regarding the Iranian regime's oppression of the Kurdish people. Those were the same 2 letters that Sheikh Azzeddin had tried to send a few months earlier by somebody named Qarani Karimi, but he was arrested and executed on the way to Tehran. Near Sardasht, the Revolutionary Guard stopped them for inspection, so Sheikh Mus hands the letters to Agneta and asks her to hide them. A woman from the Revolutionary Guards is brought in and asked to inspect Agneta, and they asked her to empty her pockets. Agneta, who has hidden the letters inside some tissue papers in her pocket, did not hesitate and bravely reprimanded the guard. "What? Do you want to inspect my tissues too?" So the inspector gives up and does not search anything else. In the same year, Agneta went to Mahabad with her spouse to participate in the 4th Congress of the Democratic Party of Iranian Kurdistan. Dr. Qasimlu, who was an old acquaintance of theirs, and they had previously accommodated him in their house twice in Sweden. That is why Dr. Qasimlu tells Agneta, "I will put you where kings and queens have slept." By this, he was referring to the palace of the Iranian Shah, which was built in Mahabad before the 1979 revolution. Agneta tells him that she had never slept in such a good place since she has been in Kurdistan. Agneta continues to serve the cause in Sweden. She begins helping in publishing the English copies of The Spark, which was the English newspaper of the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan. After publishing, she would distribute them with her husband to European and international media outlets. She also helped to print, cut, and design publications in Swedish and English, then distribute and publish them. Together with several other friends, she translated some of the poems of famous Kurdish poet Shirko Bekes into Swedish. Simultaneously, she would participate in many activities, demonstrations, conferences, meetings, and seminars. After a secret operation, Sheikh Mus was assigned a certain work abroad. She was not aware that the work is illegal, and as a result, they faced a lot of trouble and inconveniences. Later, Sheikh Mus decides to resign from PUK. The Patriotic Union's attitude towards him was not friendly, which affected Agneta as she considered it a disloyal act. Therefore, she did not visit Kurdistan for many years to come. Agneta gets delighted with the victory of the southern Kurdistan uprising, and this gives her hope for a short while, but the hope is soon gone due to the civil war. In 2001, she moved to the United States due to her spouse's work and stays there until 2007. Afterwards, she visits Kurdistan in 2008 for the first time. During her visit, Mam Jalal and Kamal Fuad tell her, "We owe you as you have worked hard with us. What do you want us to do for you? Perhaps a statue or a street in your name?" To which she responds, "Name a girls' school after me." Then she visits 2 girls' schools and talks to the students. However, unfortunately, she never got to witness any of this during her lifetime. However, in 2014, she was awarded a Medal of Honor by the PUK Political Bureau. Agneta and traditional Kurdish cuisine. Agneta was close friends with many Kurdish leaders. Therefore, she learned to cook rice through them and through her spouse as well. In 1970, Dr. Qasimlu and his friends came to attend a student congress in Stockholm. We had known each other since 1965, so they had a good relationship with Agneta. Later on, Qasimlu cooked some rice as people from eastern Kurdistan love cooking rice. He called on Agneta and told her, "Come here, let me teach you how to cook rice the traditional way." In 1987, we invited Mam Jalal. We cooked a lot of food and we knew he liked good food, but we deliberately put only some seafood on the table. He ate it and said, "Where is it? Is there any more food?" I said, "No." He followed, "Let's go outside and eat." I then said, "I'm joking, Mom. We have made more food." They brought the food in. It was dolma and potatoes. He said, "Where's the rice?" To which we replied, "We didn't make any." He turned to Agneta and said, "Get up. Let's cook some rice together." He then cooked the rice and taught Agneta how to cook it as well. Although an English journalist had come to interview Mam Jalal and Shorash Ali Askari was also present, he still cooked his own rice and didn't do the interview until after he was done eating. Agneta tells a special memory about Sheikh Mus, which is as follows. One day I was preparing dinner in the kitchen when Omar came to me and said, "Come and see what I have found in the market." I looked at him, and guess what I found in his hand? There was a bloody sheep's head in his bag. I got scared and shockingly said, "Keep this away from me. I don't want to see it," and will not come to the kitchen. That evening, he cooked the sheep's head alone and ate it. Agneta and the Kurdish question. The Kurdish question, to me, is a very just question, and I have full faith in the cause of the Kurdish people. This nation has endured a lot and has suffered in order to achieve its basic democratic rights. They have sacrificed a lot for independence and freedom, and their revolution has been ongoing for too long. In my view, the international community, Kurdish movements, and officials hold a certain responsibility, and it is time for them to make an effort to peacefully address this important question. When I was a Peshmerga in the mountains, I felt being Kurdish, and they treated me like one of their own. This was my choice. When I left Sweden, I knew I would face some problems, but I have no regrets about my choice. In the beginning, these conditions were strange to me. I didn't know much about them, but later and now everything was clear to me. I will never forget the Peshmergas who were killed and wounded during Iraqi airstrikes in 1980, and I will never forget the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's treatment towards the Kurds in East Kurdistan. Sometimes, I find it difficult to understand the conflicts and contradictions between the people in charge, as well as the corruption that has existed in the Kurdish region in recent years. I often ask myself, how could it be that the people who were ready to give everything, including their own lives, for the freedom of their people, are now making all these errors and corruption for their own personal interests? I cannot tolerate it anymore. It is the fault of the leadership of the Kurdish movement that a catastrophe faces this nation every 10 years. It is true that the international community is at fault, but you are principally at fault and responsible. The projects of Agneta and her spouse. Agneta and Sheikh Mus did not have any children. Initially, this was Sheikh Mus's fault as he refused to have children during the beginning of their marriage. However, later on when they decided to have children, Agneta twice lost her children due to uterine cancer. In 1988, after the chemical attack on Halabja, she spoke to Hero Khan and asked her to find a girl and a boy from Halabja so they could adopt them. Hero found the children and convinced their families initially, but their relatives later regretted it and refused to give their children up for adoption. In their later years, after both of them had retired, they decided to write their memoir projects. Agneta, as a Swedish citizen and European woman who had traveled to Iraq, Syria, Turkey, Iran, Lebanon, and Kurdistan, with her husband, would write her feelings, impressions, and thoughts, and her husband, a Kurd who has lived in Sweden, USA, and Britain. Agneta had written 60 pages, but unfortunately could not finish it as she passed away shortly after. Additionally, Sheikh Mus sheds light on another project as he says, "We have always had the same bank account. She inherited this money from her parents and grandparents. I have also collected some money, and I am planning to sell the house I live in and move to a small apartment. This money will be dedicated to a fund for 2 young female students, one of whom is Swedish and comes to study in Kurdistan, and the other is a Kurd coming to study in Kurdistan. We have made an official will with a lawyer and signed it. We have also informed our relatives and family about this project. Balin Saleh, a Kurdish journalist in the United States who was a close friend of Sheikh Mus and his wife for years, says the following about Agneta. A tree from across the world has traveled to this sullen country of mine and loves it. A song from the west filled with harmonious melodies decides to embark on our narrow path of life and death, embracing it. A sky packs her home and looks towards the future from a hut on the mountain valleys. Agneta turns the entire world into the sweetest candy of existence, and the love of Sheikh Mus waters the homeland with it. This is the shortest definition of Agneta. More Kurdish than a Kurd and more humane than a human being. Agneta's death and Sheikh Mus's sorrows. Omar Sheikh Mus about his wife. Agneta had a strong personality, but stubborn and had a short temper. In recent years, she would stay home often. I would have to drag her out for a walk. She was struggling with depression and worries. She smoked a lot. One night, I went to use the bathroom. Upon my return, she also went. I was starting to fall asleep when I suddenly woke up again and she still hadn't returned. I knocked on the bathroom door and called her name to see if she was okay. She said, "I am fine, but come and help me. I'm not able to get up." I held her and she got up, but fell again as she took her last breath in my embrace. That bitter night was November 20, 2019 at 5:50 a.m. I feel very lonely without her, especially since I have stayed in the same house and I needed to sell it. When I visit her grave, I ask her how she is doing and tell her about what I am up to. I tell her about the situation within my family and hers, and most importantly, I apologize to her and ask for her forgiveness about having neglected her sometimes. Honestly, despite the fact that I am a politician and revolutionary man, I didn't know that I had such a romantic side. My first homeland is Kurdistan, and after that, Sweden has become my second homeland because of Agneta. However, now I want to say that my homeland is Agneta, and I have bought the grave next to hers because I want to be buried next to her. I have informed all my family and friends about this. They disapprove of this and say, "You have to be buried in Suleymaniya." My family has the same complaint and wants me to be buried in Amuda in West Kurdistan, but I have made my decision and I want to be next to Agneta. Surely, it was Omar Sheikh Mus's love for Agneta that pulled her to join a movement full of obstacles, ups and downs, successes, and setbacks, and made her become part of us Kurds. Although the disloyalty of the revolutionary leaders in South Kurdistan did not deter him from serving and supporting the Kurds, Omar's genuine loyalty to Agneta is a great lesson in understanding the relationship between love, politics, and power. Only exceptional people like Omar Sheikh Mus and his likes would be able to preserve that balance.
Bejarun ya çabenim